Good morning, everybody. 4th of July, yes, and I get it's a holiday and there might not be a whole lot of people. I get it. But when the topic got given, I could not say, okay, I can't. I can't. And so here we are today, holiday or not. Um, I will tell you why how this topic came about. And as long as I can find it again, I'm going to give everybody a reasoning as to how this popped in. Let me see if it's under my wow section here. It is not under my wow because I do want you to hear it because it's something I think has been going around for a while um, in the church spaces. A lot of the pulpits say it. Um, the New Age idea. It's been going around, so I wanted to tackle it. Um, and if I can't find it, that's okay. But I'm sure you'll understand when you see it. The sentiment of this idea of spouses being the love of one's life has become more and more pervasive. And I'm not saying you shouldn't love your spouse. Please understand that's not what I'm saying. But I do believe that the current concept of marriage and love is quite askewed from what it is biblically. Um, I think we have a very fantastical idea of love, and it causes more problems than it does solutions. What it comes down to is making the spouse more import than God Himself. And here's why I say that. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen videos and commercials of people saying they can't live without somebody, and if you went away, I don't know what I'd do. If you died tomorrow, I would be absolutely beside myself and I wouldn't be able to go on. Um, these concepts have become love. That's what we've now taken true, deep meaning love to me. And we'll make all kinds of correlation. Um, we'll make correlations of lifetime love and um, soulmates, and we will call things. Um, I found you in another lifetime, and I'll love you through the ages, and I'll love you across any. It gets pretty ridiculous. And I saw it, and the first thing that popped in my head was, I am I guilty of doing just that, of holding my spouse in a place that should be reserved for God? Now, again, I'm not saying to not love your spouse. I'm saying that we are all, most of us, let me not say all, um, are guilty of having this investment in people that we should have in God, and it becomes a problem. And I think this is why we can't um, love properly. Um, Herbert, let me get you taken care of before I get any further because I know I'll forget. Hopefully that is a little bigger for you. Um, but I I got the information via that video, and the first verse that popped into my head was Ephesians, and it said this. Let me go to verse 19. I think I'll go from verse 19. So Ephesians 5:19 19, and he's talking about the body, right? Speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord, giving thanks always for all things to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another in fear of God. And I thought to myself, okay, well, the next part of the verse is about the spouse. So, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. Women have the problem of submitting because they look at the husband, because of how nature has now dictated it, as the lead. They have a problem submitting to him because men are seen a certain way in society, and we've kind of transposed that on top of marriage. So when women hear submit, they're like, no, I'm my own person. They ignore that last part, and that's wherein the problem lies. It says, as to the Lord. Now, consider this: if you don't have submission to the Lord, you really don't know how to properly submit to your husband because you have no correlation, you have no basis for it. You can't say, oh, I submit, but you don't know how. Okay, but society says the man's the head, the man rules. And in your head, you're thinking, well, what about my needs and what about what I want? And we end up removing love from the Bible and putting it on mankind. And then we take man's idea of love and superimpose it on top of the Bible. And it now becomes rule of thumb. Wives, submit yours own to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is the head of the church, and he is the savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. But when you take the world's viewpoint of love, what does the world say? It's 50-50, right? The world says whatever the husband's allowed to do, the wife's allowed to do whatever you get what I'm saying? So now we've taken this concept of love and planted it squarely in the Bible as though it's now biblical. And I think that is a very, 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 very dangerous thing. So I'm gonna read this to you real quick. Let me see if I can find the. Let me see if I can find the right one here because I know we've all seen, heard these particular statements. Let's go and find it here. If I can find, if it's so difficult all of a sudden to get it. Okay, let's go. I got it. Finally got it. I think. Okay. When you do a marriage vow at the wedding, what is the most predominant thing that they try to harp on? And I'm sure most of you can tell me. What is the most predominant thing that they harp on? And I'll read it to you so you can tell me. You can tell me if you're not a pest. Don't worry about it. If you can tell me um, what exactly makes sense to you or doesn't make sense to you. Okay. Here we go. I'm going to read it for you. Here we go. I, Sam, take you to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until we are parted in death. This is my solemn vow. Can anyone tell me, if you don't mind, tell me if that is biblical? Can you define for me what portions of that is biblical? Okay. We have become, though, a culture that is the normalcy because we have now made the person of more import than anything else, including God Himself. It has now become more important than God because we've taken things that should be ascribed to God and planted it squarely on our human spouse. Now, again, if we don't have a connection to God in the way He suggested it, there is no way for you to successfully transfer that to your spouse. You can't do it because you have no concept of what it means to be married. You want to know why it's difficult to navigate marital waters? It's difficult because we always try and place the person in a spot that's reserved for God. And I'm sorry to say, but it's what we do. Take, for instance, okay, let's go to the husbands real quick. Husbands, love your wives. Most pastors stop right there, or they will say the next line, just as Christ also loved the church. And then they'll go and gave himself for her. So they'll go to all the humanistic approaches to it, but they will ignore the baseline. It says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. Now, how would you know if you are not aware of how Christ loved the church? So, what should the husband's first point of import be? Learning Christ's love. Because if he doesn't understand how Christ loved the church, he will never understand how to love his wife. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But today, we have left the realm of biblical God based marriage and love and brought in the world's version of it. It is why we have the kind of problems we do. Your spouse is not and should not be the love of your life because if you technically look at this, you have none. Let's just start at the baseline here, okay? As a believer, you are called to die to self. So, how can that person be the love of your life? Please tell me how. Because once they're the love of your life, you are being selfish. How? Because you're telling, well, they're the love of my life because I can't live without them. You can't live without them. You realize how selfish that particular viewpoint is? You want to know why people get so angry when somebody does something they don't like? Because you're crossing a line that I don't want crossed. It doesn't mean they're doing anything bad or wrong. They just crossed the line you don't want them crossing. This is why marriage falls apart. And I can attest to it because every time one is selfish, problems arise. And they become selfish because one puts himself in a position that's expecting the other person to serve them in a way that is not God ordained. It really is that simple. So, considering that you do get the concept that you love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or no, any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. So, husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes just as the Lord does the church. Now, in comes the world again. I will love my spouse as much as I love me. That's what they'll say it says. But is that what it says? He makes a very different differentiation here between love of self as a personality and love of self as an existence. When he says husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies, and no one ever hated his own flesh but nourishes it, you still eat, you still feed it. It is still something you take care of, right? Good. But to take care of something, you have to have some sort of an idea of what it takes to take care of it. Unfortunately, men today don't know because they have no concept of what God's love is. And so, what they eventually do is they will transpose love to what they will say, putting them above everything else. You get so if you don't treat me the way I feel I should be treated, you obviously don't love me. You've heard that before? How can you say you love me and you don't give me what I want? How can you say you love me and you don't let me do what I want to do? How can you say you love me if you don't do blah, 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 blah? That is how we are now seeing marriage. You're the love of my life. I now remember what the thing said. It said, loving you or finding you was fate, loving you was a choice. And how did the last part go? And it was supposed to be this gift that they gave their loved one. And the more it played in my head, the less it made sense. The more it played, the less it made sense. Because I could that didn't how is it fate? And what exactly do humankind consider fate? Finding you was fate. Loving you was a choice. Maybe it's under likes. Okay, this might have some hope here. If I remember correctly, it was yesterday, late yesterday, that I saw it. And I have been through a lot of Instagram stories since. But I need to find it for the purposes of what we have going on here. No, cannot find it. That's okay. But I'm sure you've heard the sentiment before. I'm sure you've heard it before. But we have taken a worldly view of love and planted it as though it's God's, and we have completely forgotten who we're supposed to model stuff after because we don't really know him. I think many of us think okay, God loves, good. God loves. What does his love look like? What does God and his love look like? Does his love allow for everything, one, or does his love curtail certain things? And secondarily, in his love, does are there roles? There are all of the above. There is a certain criteria, there is a role, there is a function, there is hierarchy in God's version of love. It's not so in man's. Man's love, idea anyway, of love is selfish. And I mean ultimately selfish, unlimitless selfishness, because it is about what the other person brings to you, not what you offer, what they bring to you to prove they love you. That's how we have now done marriage. I have to do more and more and more and more and more and more to keep proving love, as opposed to the man following Christ and Christ loving through. There it is. That's what it was. Meeting you was fate, becoming your friend was a choice, but falling in love with you was beyond my control. Really? Thank you, Elizabeth, for finding that statement. But falling in love with you was beyond my control. And it sounds really, I mean, really good on the surface. Think about it, okay? You are a single person, and you are just wanting someone to accept you, love you. You're hoping to find a spouse. This kind of sentiment is amazing to hear, that you are so wanted by somebody they couldn't help themselves. Everything just, there was no control over it. They saw you and love. Instant, bam, love. Man, woo, I can't help but love you. It's impossible to not love you. But here's a crazy part. Here's a crazy thing. Biblically, God has given us not a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and self-control. So how can you rectify those two? How can you on in one mindset tell me that this love is of God, and you have this statement of, I'm going to bring it back up, of falling in love with you was beyond my control, when it tells you that God himself gave you a spirit of self-control? One of the two is wrong. And I can probably go on a limb and say the version that we have of no self-control, or no control over what I did, or no control of falling in love with you, that might be not of God. That might just be not of God. Now, what exactly would that self-control look like? I'm not going to, although we will talk about this at the seminar, by the way. Men, listen carefully, and women, we will talk about this at the seminar. And that is the interaction of males and females in a marriage when it comes to the marriage bed. We will talk about that. But many of us have a skewed view of what it is to be in control. You, this When I tell it becomes this massive convolution because we've been told a lie for so long. Having this concept in your mind that I couldn't help but falling in love with you, it is very chaotic. It is ultimately chaotic because now you're depending on the person to catch you. When someone says I couldn't help but fall in love with you and the person doesn't reciprocate, the first thing that happens in your mind is anger because it's not given back. They didn't catch you, and you think for yourself that I couldn't help it, and you looking at me now and you're telling me you don't love me. How dare you? But when it's controlled and tempered, you can look at somebody, and the first thing you look for is their relationship with God. There is no falling, because what attracts you to that person is God, not not what they bring to the table, not their looks. Those might be pros and benefits and some perks, but they're not the goal. You know what will help you stay grounded in a marriage is if you understand who God is. And I mean personally understand who God is. Because if you don't personally understand who God is, you can't see God in the other person because you don't know how to identify him. And the instant you can't identify him, everything the person does will be hinged on how you think they view you. And then they'll do something little that has nothing to do with you, and you take offense to it. Because everything is about you. Because their love has to be aimed at something you want by definition. But that's not biblical. That's not biblical. Like at all. None of it is biblical. If you can't love your spouse the way Christ loved the church, then you don't love your spouse. Let's just be frank. It's not love. It's something else, but it's not love. And we do need to get back to what love is. We have to get back to that. If we don't get back to that, we will make everything else that isn't love, love. We'll start saying this. You don't love me if you don't cook breakfast. You don't love me if you don't wash my clothes. You don't love if you don't do A, B, C, D, E, F, and G in the day. And you definitely don't love me if you don't do X, Y, and Z. And then the person says, well, if you can't see that I love you, then you obviously don't recognize love. And here we have boom, 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 boom. And we just keep clashing and clashing and clashing. And eventually, you can no longer talk to each other because neither one of you are going to start listening anymore because I'm identifying you as the enemy now. And there we go. We're done. I'm going to go look for somebody else that will really love me. Only to realize the person doesn't love you either because they can't realize who you are. They don't care who you are. They have a concept of they want you to be. And when you're not that, again, more conflict. And you continue this cycle over and over and over and over. And then you decide, all right, no more marriage. I'm not getting married no more. I'm just going to have girlfriends and boyfriends. And then, of course, you forget the other half of marriage, which is the fulfillment of certain duties. Now, your body still wants it because you have not canceled the idea of love in your mind. You just canceled the idea of marriage. So your body's still requiring certain things. So what you go do, you make an excuse for the things you do that fulfill that portion of your love or lust at that point because it's no longer fulfilling. And before too long, guilt sets in and you say, okay, I will get married so I can actually do the deed legally. Still not about actual marriage. It's about doing something for yourself. Now, here's the crazy part. When you do actually know God in somebody else, fulfilling what the person has as a humanistic trait becomes easy. But here's the other part. The person requesting things won't make a request selfishly. You see how it works? So if you are married to somebody that's godly and you yourself are, You won't require something of them that's not godly, and they won't expect something from you that's not godly. It automatically removes the selfishness from the equation. Right off the top, gets rid of it. It's done. And then whatever the person is needing, you can give because it's not about you. And whatever the person is requiring is also the same because it's not about them. You actually get to invest yourself in knowing the person because the person is embodying the only person they follow, which is God. And it works out perfectly because the God in them will not require something that the God in the other person can't fulfill because he's not a God of confusion. He is a God of unity. But every time we enter into a relationship where the setting is based on what man has as love, both sides end up coming to it selfishly. I'm going to get into a spot here that people, I want you to just bear with me. Okay. For the most part, men are physical in their attraction, at least in the humanistic side. Okay. A man will look for a certain type of woman. They expect a certain kind of behavior in the bedroom and blah, blah, blah. Same thing nowadays with women. What happens when the clash occurs over stuff that happens in the bedroom? You didn't give me what I want, and you didn't give me what I want, and now we're both upset because this didn't take place the way we wanted it to take place, and blibbity blabbity blue. Is that something that God can rectify? Of course it is. Because the more you submit to God, the easier it becomes to submit to your spouse. And the more you love God, men, the easier it becomes to love your spouse. What comes with love? It's an automatic submission. But with the man's hierarchy, it also becomes very easy to rule and to lead rightly. Biblically, biblically, what my spouse wants, I give. I give. And it shouldn't be a hardship, but it has become hardship for many. Okay, biblically. Let's go to biblical here. We're going to go to First Corinthians since we are going to take our inferences from the Bible, okay? We're going to go to First Corinthians chapter 7, okay? So let's read that real quick. This is where it's coming from. It is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, because of sexual immorality, let each man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. Okay. Let the husband render to his wife the affection due her, and likewise the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except with consent for a time, that you may give yourself to fasting and prayer and come together again, so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self control. Now, many read that and they will put this caveat of within reason. Because again, human love is selfish. Human love is selfish, and I have a limit. However, we forget the whole picture. Following God will not make you want something ungodly. Case in point, you decided to get married. And one day your spouse comes to you and says, I want an open marriage because it is physically what I want, what I desire. I desire more than one of you in the bedroom. Suppose they come to you and say that. And then they bring to you this: let the husband render to his wife the affections due her, and likewise the wife to her husband. Suppose they bring that to you. Do you say, well, I have to because I can't deny my spouse? You know what would never happen? If you picked your spouse based on God, that request would never come your way. And the instant that request comes your way, you know exactly what's in the other person. But here's the thing, without God, that request is completely reasonable. You might think I'm being absolutely, satanic here, but I said without God, that request is completely reasonable. It is. It's 100% reasonable because you're not basing it on anything moral. You're basing it based on whatever you want because love in the human world is selfish. Your spouse won't require things of you that the God in them is against. Here's the other side to it. God knows the flesh 100%. He also knows exactly what you will need because he also understands every aspect of you. And as long as you stay where he is, he will fulfill what needs to be fulfilled in the flesh. He will. He'll take care of that. He'll take it 100%. He'll take care of that. You stay focused on him and he'll take care of the rest. And if that means cutting off something of a wish that you had because of some sort of past sin you had, he'll take that away. Hmm. It happens. It's automatic. What we like to do, though, is intervene. And we put our aspect of love on God as though we are the arbiter of the word. He goes on to say this: but I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them if they remain even as I am. But if they cannot exercise self control, let them marry. For it is better to marry than to burn with passion. You know what the Spirit does? Remember, it says it gives you a spirit of self control. Now, is self control meaning to not ever get married? Or is self control understanding what you can and cannot do, what you're capable and not capable of doing? Understanding self control is a twofold thing. You can become something, or you can understand that you're not that. There are some people, I'll start with myself. I would be horrible single. I can tell you that right now. I fully understand the strength of my flesh. I understand the strength of God. I do 100%, but I also understand my weakness. I know my weakness. I have a very pervasive flesh. Very. God, though, when I actually handed myself off to him, fulfilled all of that in my spouse. It's a kind of a crazy thing. I didn't beg for this. I did not go hunting for it. It came to me. It would not, though, if I had not surrendered. The first thing you ought to say, you're single, but you want a spouse. The first thing is not to try and go find a spouse. The first thing is to make yourself spouse ready. You have to be spouse ready. And what does that mean? That means you have to find the one person that can link you with your spouse, and that's God. See, God knows you better than you know you. Every hair in your head, He knows. When you submit to Him, He knows the hairs of everybody's head. He knows exactly what it would take to keep control. He knows. We think we do, but He knows better. Which is why it's important to submit to Him first so that you can understand what exactly to look for, because you'll be looking for Him, not for yourself, for Him. If you are married right now and there are issues going on, ask yourself this one important question. Am I the issue? Am I expecting something from my spouse that is unreasonable? Am I expecting something from my spouse that is based on something I want for me that I never expressed to them? Better yet, am I expecting something from them that I never even expressed to God? Too many of us don't communicate biblically, God based to our spouse. We don't. And I don't mean in our communication of being mean and all. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about expressing our expectations. If you remember what this says, right? Look at the verse again. Do not deprive one another except with consent for a time. How does that happen? You have to do what? You have to communicate it. And then come together again so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self control. What does that mean? Communication. You have to, you can't expect your spouse to know anything if you don't tell them. If Jesus tells you to bring your requests and make them known to Him, and then He asks you to be like that in your marriage in terms of Christ and the church, how are you going to expect the church to function a certain way? And He's telling you marriage is like it by communicating with Christ, and you don't communicate with your spouse. You don't bring your requests. How are they going to be fulfilled? But then you get mad because something doesn't happen and you never communicated it. And I'm sorry to say this, but a lot of this women are guilty of. My wife, awesome as she is, has conversations in her head all the time and expects me to be privy to them, right? Women, I'm sorry to tell you, but that's the majority of y'all, okay? Y'all constantly have conversations with yourself and think that men are in that conversation. We don't have that conversation. We never got included. But in your world, we should know based on your emotional output and how you move around the house. We should know. And sometimes it becomes so perfect. You think we actually had the conversation with us. You never did. You never did. It's like, I'm supposed to read your mind about this? No, no, no. I don't care how uncomfortable it might be. You have to communicate it. Here's the flip side. I am supposed to be receptive. I'm supposed to be receptive. You are supposed to feel at home coming to me with something. Requests, problems, all of it. That is where the husband's place in Christ should be exemplified. I hear you. And not only do I hear you, in what I intake, it'll tell me whether or not what you're requesting is godly. Same thing with me telling my wife something, the God in her should tell her whether or not my request is godly. Both sides fight because both sides don't love. They don't. They have this superficial worldly idea that everything needs to be hunky dory and it's a swan type love till the end of time. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that there's not that type of love, but when you look at that type of love, you realize it's not human. My former father-in-law and his wife, and his father and his wife, I would tell you right now, I have not seen outside of my mom and dad, I have not seen love like that on that level many places. Elton and Gladys were two of the most exemplary people when it came to marriage, and that's my former father-in-law. His father's name was Elton. His wife was Gladys. They had the most hilarious marriage I have ever seen. But not hilarious bad, hilarious awesome. They both understood each other so well because they both understood God. Not to the point of perfection, but everything they filtered with each other was filtered through God, period, all the time. I could never understand it. It was always filtered through God. Every conversation was. I'm not even making this up. Every time. He understood her because he understood where he was in Christ. She understood him because she understood where she was in Christ. Larry and Carol, the exact same thing. Carol was a handful. I'm not going to lie. I miss the lady a lot. She died recently. And their love was crazy cool. Like, I mean, she was, she was like, we used to call her Tweety Bird, okay? Because she was short and she had these, big hair. Beautiful lady, beautiful in soul, beautiful. Not to say she didn't have her issues, she had her issues. But in terms of their marriage, it was long lasting, and you could tell that they fought to get there. And I don't mean like they fought to preserve their love. No one was allowed to come in between it, not even children, not even their grown children could have anything to say about each other. You're not going to talk about my wife like that. And you're not going to talk about my husband like that. I don't care if you are my kid. To me, unfortunately, when people get married and they have children, the children become more important than the spouse. But that's not biblical either. God never equated the church as a child, it's a spouse. The children were always taken care of, yes, but they never took preeminence. And when you see this kind of information come out about people who put their kids in between them and they end up fighting, and before too long, when they get old and the children leave the home, they don't know each other. They don't have a concept of what each other likes because they've never made it about each other. They've never made it about God, even. They made it about the kids, or they made it about work, or they made it about income. The basis that the world puts marriage in is wrong, 100% unequivocally wrong. Unequivocally. Now, that's not to say that Larry didn't have to put his foot down a few times with Carol. He did, but he did it, and she understood where it came from. And this is part of the issue. When you are in tune with God yourself, you will understand that the other person's correction is not from a place of disdain. It's from a place that you should know full well, like when God corrects you. You know how much less problems you'll have when you do that? I'm learning myself to catch when I overreact to something or I act out of a place where the issue is more important than the relationship. And I've learned too that while I may not be able to verbally apologize, I found a way to apologize right away without it being verbal. In terms of like saying it, I will either text, send a message, do something to apologize for the way I reacted. And it's becoming more normal now. But the problem is that I'm fighting my history. I've also ingrained my spouse to a certain reaction from myself. And so when I do act in a certain way, it has now become, oh, it wasn't that big a deal when it really is a big deal. And I'm trying to now change course to where I have my wife understand that my reaction is uncalled for. And it is a very big deal because what it ends up doing is creating a very false sense of love. So when I apologize for an outburst or a poor reaction to something, I am not doing that in order to say, come across good. I'm doing that because I realized that for a long time, my reaction has now ingrained in her that this is normal. And it's not, and it should never be normal because that's not how God reacts. And so when my apologies happen, it's coming from a place I want to course correct. I want this to be different. I don't want to be the kind of person that lets the situation rule my reaction. I need to have God rule my reaction regardless of the situation. And my apology should be instantaneous. It will eventually get to the point where I can not even give that reaction. The reaction will start to, and it'll get caught before it happens. I know I'll get there, but I know I'm not there yet. I know it. And it's not sin. Mind you, this isn't like a sin issue. This is just a subduing of the flesh issue. I don't want to react there. I want to react out of a place where, hey, this is going to be the new norm. It takes time, but when you understand the location from where you get that reaction, it helps. So, no, your spouse is not the love of your life. God is. But God may express his love for you through your spouse. God will definitely show you who he is through your spouse. And he will show himself to your spouse through you. You have to leave yourself open for that. And if you don't, you're in massive amounts of trouble because all that'll happen is offense after offense after offense after offense after offense. And before too long, too many offenses happen and you're no longer able to see yourself forgiving that person and divorce happens. Stop taking these worldly ideas of love and start fashioning things after what God says love is. There's a reason why his works and man's way doesn't. There's a reason. We don't want to take that reason because we love ourselves too much. And again, we go back to the fact that you have to die to self. When you do that, it'll leave room for him. In any event, if you're not married, when you do look for a spouse, or if you are looking for a spouse, get yourself ready to be one first. Don't look for what you're looking for and find what the person, oh, I need this look good looking, this amount of money, this, that. You get yourself in tune with God first. Because if you know what God is like, you'll know what he looks like in somebody else, and you won't pick wrong. You won't do the superficial thing of saying, well, I could see myself having kids with that person. Oh, well, That person has a fair amount of money that I can at least live life nice with. Or they have a nice house. I can think, and they own their own business. Oh, that's even better. Oh, she's good looking. Oh, I could make they'll be good looking kids. No, see to it that you are in tune with the Father so that He can pick it for you. Yes, of course, a woman should look. Of course. Unfortunately, a lot of women pick wrong too. Okay, and I'll tell you this. I know this for a fact, and y'all can disagree if you want. But a lot of women look for males and spouses out of hurt. They look for a man that they hope won't be like somebody else that hurts them, right? And so they look for him, but they look for it on a certain level of looks and what they bring to help them live life comfortably, because they've been told a lie that comfort equals love. It doesn't. Love has a lot of discomfort to it, by the way. It does. Men look for somebody who they think will make their life easy. And when a woman does even the smallest thing that doesn't make your life easy, we get mad. You see where the problem lies? You're both coming at this very selfishly. What you can do for me, and what you can do for me. No, what you can do for me. No, no, what you can do for me. What about what can the God that you follow do for yourself to get rid of the self you have so that he can look for the person for you? How about that? How about you measure all the people you're interested in against God so you can see whether or not what they have and possess is of him? Because once you see that it's of him, trust and believe me, the rest is all gravy because he's the most important part. And look, it's not about looks, not about offspring, not about money. I have seen more happy broke people than I have seen happy rich ones. I've seen more happy homeless people than I have seen happy homed ones. I've seen more couples ecstatic over each other that aren't the best looking. I've seen more conflict between two smashingly good looking people than I have between ugly ones, at least what people consider ugly. Why? Because they've let go of the superficial. It is unimportant. In any case, if you're married or single, the first person you need to find a good relationship with is God. Once you find that, let him do what he's got to do. And I don't care how long it takes because it's his time, not yours. And you won't care how long it takes because it's his time and not yours. I already have a topic for tomorrow that was dropped yesterday, but I'm posting it um, later today. And I'm going to give you again, a little preview of what it is. And you can make your own assumptions about it, obviously, and make your own decisions about it. But um, the topic is that of can you forgive Jesus? Can you forgive Jesus? Is that something that's required of you to forgive Jesus? I'll tell you what the whole premise of it tomorrow, but I'll let your minds run with that one. Forgive Jesus. Look, hey, look, I understand the question seems a little little insane, but um, there are more people that preach that than you think. I'm telling you, there are more people that preach that than you think. And I'll show you how they deliver it. Okay, I'll show you how they deliver it. Hey, look, I'm just, I'm just telling you. Look, when I first heard the statement, I too was confused. But hey, when you hear the delivery of it, you'll understand what I mean. When you hear the delivery of it, you'll see what I mean and why people preach it. A certain group of people, anyway. Yes, and why it's stupid. I get that it's dumb, it's unbiblical, heresy kind of, but you'll understand how they deliver it and why many people will believe it. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Because it is more pervasive than you think. You just may not have heard it stated as you need to forgive Jesus. You may not have heard it stated like that, although they do, but you may have heard it a little bit different, but it's the same sentiment. I'm telling you, trust me, you'll understand when I show you tomorrow. Um, yeah, it it will make more sense. I mean, it'll still anger you, but I think you'll see it more pervasive than you think you're seeing it right now. You might even buy into it and you don't realize it. It may upset you, but I think many of us either have bought into it or are buying into it without realizing we're buying into it. What the? Right? I'm telling you, when I show you, I'll tell you what you see what I mean. You'll see what I mean. You'll see what I mean. You may not be buying into it now, but I think at one point or another, we have all bought into it and we didn't realize we bought into it. Okay, you want to, I can't help it. Have you at any time said these words? Why me, God? Have you ever, and be honest with yourself, have you ever said those words to yourself? Why me, God? Why do I have to go through this? Have you ever said those words? You have? Okay. If you've ever said those words, you're holding God to what? Account, right? You're saying, I don't trust your judgment. You you see how you've done it too? Okay. 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 I'm just saying many of us have bought into it. We just don't realize we bought into it. Just saying. And when I break it out tomorrow, you'll see exactly what I mean. All right. So just keep that in mind. I'll set it up as soon as I'm done here and we'll go. All right, good. Um, again, scrolling at the bottom, the options to help out, assist, to whatever you've consulted with God about. Okay. Okay. See? Uh huh. Uh huh. Uh huh. I'm just saying we do it more than we think. We do it more than we think. We do it more than we think. Or at least we have. Some of us, we've done it more than we thought. Some people are just more brazen with the statements. That's all. But we've all had our opportunity to say, yo, God, why would you do? Why would you allow? How could you? That's suggesting that he needs forgiveness for whatever he did. I'm telling you. Hey, yes. Now, if you blame God for something, in your mind, he's at fault. If he's at fault, what do you do with somebody who's at fault? You have to do what? Forgive him. I'm just saying, it's logically right there. But we just don't want to see it like that. We don't want to see it like that because that's not. I'm not. No, no, no. I'm not. Yeah, you are. Yeah, yeah, you are. You are. If he's perfect, there is no way you can blame him for anything. If he's perfect, in your mind, if he's perfect, there's no way you can blame him for anything. Just a food for thought, people. Just trying to keep you honest. That's all. Okay. Okay. All right. Sweet. We'll talk tomorrow. Scrolling at the bottom again is the options for helping the channel out. Feel free to do so or not do so. Consult with God about it, obviously. We'll catch you guys tomorrow for that topic, and Savage Patriots will be on tomorrow, and we will also be on Saturday, okay, for the Rumble event. We'll catch you guys then. Wisdom calls to you from the streets, so please, please, please find wisdom. Peace.
Hold tight the dreams, for if dreams die, rely on yourself and know